Jake Morrison was having a good day until the aliens showed up. He had been walking through the Colorado mountains with his backpack full of camping gear when a bright light appeared above him. The light got bigger and bigger until it covered the whole sky. Jake stopped walking and looked up. He had seen strange things before during his years as a wilderness survival instructor, but nothing like this. The light pulled him up into the air. Jake felt his feet leave the ground and his body float upward. He was not scared because he had always been calm in weird situations. His backpack stayed with him as he rose into the bright light. When the pulling stopped, Jake found himself standing in a large room made of what looked like crystal. 3 tall beings stood in front of him. They were twice as tall as Jake, and their bodies looked like they were made of clear glass with light moving inside them. When they spoke, their voices sounded like music, but Jake could understand every word they said. The first being stepped forward and made a sound like wind chimes. Jake heard the words in his head. "Human Jake Morrison, you have been chosen for the great trial. We are the Zephyrian Council, and we have been watching your species for many years." Jake adjusted his backpack straps and smiled. "Well, hello there. Nice ship you have here. Do you folks have any snacks? That hike made me pretty hungry." The 3 beings looked at each other. The second one spoke with sounds like a harp. "You do not understand human. You have been selected for the trial of endurance. This is the most sacred test in our galaxy. Only the strongest warriors from each species are chosen to prove their worth." Jake nodded and pulled a granola bar from his pocket. He unwrapped it and took a bite. "Sounds interesting. Where exactly are we going for this trial thing?" The third being made angry sounds like breaking glass. "This is serious, human. The trial takes place on Kepler 442b. It is a world of death and danger. Most who enter the trial die within days. Your species is considered weak. We expect you to die quickly." Jake finished his granola bar and looked around the crystal room. "Well, that does not sound very nice. But I have been camping in some pretty rough places. How long does this trial last?" The first being answered, 30 days. You will face deadly creatures and terrible storms. There is little food and the water will burn your throat. The ground itself tries to kill all who walk on it." Jake whistled softly. 30 days of camping on a dangerous planet sounds like fun. I brought my gear. So I should be okay. When do we start? The aliens made confused sounds. They had never met a human before, and Jake was not acting the way they expected. Most beings chosen for the trial begged for their lives or tried to fight. Jake seemed excited about the whole thing. The ship traveled through space for what felt like hours. Jake spent the time checking his camping equipment and asking the aliens questions about the planet. He wanted to know about the weather and what kinds of animals lived there. The Zephyrians answered his questions, but they seemed puzzled by his calm attitude. When they reached Kepler 442b, Jake looked out through the crystal walls of the ship. The planet below looked harsh and wild. Red storms moved across dark continents, and strange lights flickered in the atmosphere. Jake had camped in deserts and mountains and frozen forests, but this place looked different from anything on Earth. The ship landed on a flat area surrounded by sharp black rocks. Jake could see other ships nearby and beings from different species walking around. Some looked like giant lizards covered in metal plates. Others had many arms and moved like sea creatures on land. All of them looked ready for war. The Zephyrians led Jake out of the ship. The air smelled like metal and burned his nose a little. The gravity felt different and made each step feel heavy. In the distance, Jake could see mountains that looked like broken glass and forests that seemed to glow with their own light. "Here is where you will begin the trial, human," the first being said. "You may take only what you carry. There are no rules except to survive. The trial ends in 30 days. If you live, you will be honored among all species in the galaxy." Jake shouldered his backpack and looked around. Other contestants were already moving away from the landing area. Some ran toward the mountains, while others headed for the glowing forests. They all seemed to be in a hurry to get started. "Thanks for the ride," Jake said to the aliens. "This place looks pretty wild. I'm going to set up camp over there by those rocks." They will give me some wind protection. The Zephyrians watched Jake walk calmly toward a cluster of black stones. He moved like he was starting a regular camping trip instead of fighting for his life. Jake found a good spot between two large rocks and started unpacking his gear. The other contestants were already disappearing into the dangerous landscape. A big lizard creature roared at something in the distance. Strange bird calls echoed from the glowing forest. The red storms on the horizon looked like they were getting closer. Jake spread out his tarp and began setting up what looked like a simple shelter. He worked slowly and carefully like he had done thousands of times before on Earth. He hummed a quiet song while he worked. The Zephyrians stood by their ship and watched Jake through special devices that let them see far away. They had monitored hundreds of trials over many years. Never had they seen a contestant act like this human. Most species spent their first hours running and hiding and fighting. Jake was making what looked like a comfortable camp. "This human does not understand the danger," the second being said. "Perhaps humans are too simple to feel fear," said the third. The first being made thoughtful sounds. "Or perhaps this human understands something we do not." Jake finished his shelter and started gathering dry materials for a fire. The alien planet had strange plants, but Jake could tell which ones would burn well. He had learned to read the land during his years teaching survival skills. Even on this weird world, he could see the patterns that would help him survive. As the alien sun began to set, Jake had a small fire burning safely inside a circle of rocks. Smoke rose into the darkening sky. The other contestants were hidden somewhere in the wilderness, but Jake sat calmly by his fire and prepared a simple meal from his supplies. Jake woke up on his third day on the alien planet feeling rested and comfortable. His simple shelter had kept him warm through the cold night, and his fire was still burning with just a few glowing coals. He stretched and looked around at the strange landscape in the morning light. The other contestants had not been so lucky. Jake could hear roaring and shouting from different directions. Something big crashed through the glowing forest and made the ground shake. Strange howls echoed from the glass mountains. The trial was clearly not going well for most of the beings who had come here to prove themselves. Jake made breakfast using his camp stove and some dried food from his pack. While he ate, he watched large shapes moving in the sky above him. The creatures looked like birds, but they were much bigger than any bird on Earth. Their wings were dark and seemed to be made of metal. Sharp claws hung from their feet like knives. Other contestants ran when they saw these razorhawks. Jake watched a lizard warrior fire energy weapons at them while running toward the mountains. The birds circled overhead, making terrible screeching sounds. But Jake noticed something interesting about their behavior. The hawks always flew in the same pattern. They came from the east in the morning and went back that way in the evening. During the middle of the day, they stayed near a group of tall rock spires about a mile away. Jake finished his breakfast and decided to take a closer look. He packed his gear carefully and walked toward the rock spires. The hawks circled overhead, but they did not attack him. Jake moved slowly and kept his hands visible. He had learned from years in the wilderness that most animals only attacked when they felt threatened. When he got close to the spires, Jake could see large nests built on the high ledges. Baby hawks sat in the nests waiting for their parents to bring food. The adult birds were not hunting the contestants for sport. They were protecting their children. Jake smiled and backed away from the nesting area. He set up his camp about half a mile from the spires where he could watch the hawks but not threaten their babies. The birds stopped circling and went back to their normal hunting patterns. That afternoon, Jake noticed something else about the hawks. When they groomed themselves, they dropped large metallic feathers. The feathers were sharp and strong and would make excellent tools. Jake carefully collected several feathers that had fallen far from the nests. Near his new camp, Jake found a stream of water that glowed with a strange green light. The water smelled sharp and made his eyes water when he got too close. Other contestants would think this water was poison, but Jake had seen similar things in hot springs back on Earth. He tested the water carefully. It was very acidic, but it was also full of minerals. Jake used his camp filter and some baking soda from his first aid kit to make the water safe to drink. The minerals in the water actually made it taste better than regular water. Jake used the sharp hawk feathers to make fishing hooks. He found insects and small creatures near the stream to use as bait. The acid water was full of strange fish that looked like swimming crystals. They were careful and smart, but Jake was patient. While he fished, Jake watched other contestants struggling in the distance. A group of sea creatures had built a shelter near a different stream, but they looked hungry and tired. The lizard warrior was still running from something in the glass mountains. Sounds of fighting came from the glowing forest. Jake caught several crystal fish and cooked them over his fire. They tasted like chicken, but with a slight buzz that made his tongue tingle. He saved some of the fish for later and used the bones to make better fishing tools. On his 5th day, the red storms finally reached Jake's area. The sky turned dark and lightning flashed in colors Jake had never seen before. Rain began to fall. But it was not normal rain. The drops burned when they hit skin and smoked when they hit the ground. Other contestants hid in caves or tried to build underground shelters. Jake had been preparing for this storm since he first saw it on the horizon. He stretched his tarp between rocks to make a slanted roof that would catch the rain and channel it away from his camp. The acid rain could not hurt him if he stayed under his shelter. But Jake noticed that plants grew bigger and greener where the rain touched the ground. The acid rain was actually full of nutrients that plants needed. Jake set up containers to collect the rainwater. After the storm passed, Jake had several containers full of mineral-rich water. He tested it carefully and found that when mixed with regular water, it made an excellent fertilizer. Jake had noticed edible plants growing near his camp and decided to try an experiment. He found seeds from plants that looked like they might be good to eat. Jake planted them in small plots and watered them with diluted acid rain. The seeds sprouted faster than he expected and grew into plants that produced nutritious fruits and vegetables. While Jake was gardening, he heard small scratching sounds coming from holes in the ground. He sat very still and waited. Eventually, small furry creatures poked their heads out of the holes. They looked like mice, but they were bigger and had strange markings on their fur. The creatures watched Jake carefully. He offered them small pieces of fruit from his plants. After a few days, the animals became comfortable around him. Jake called them tunnel mice because they lived in underground burrows. The mice were very good at finding water sources. They could sense underground streams and springs from far away. Jake followed them and found several reliable water sources that other contestants had missed. He marked these spots with small rock piles so he could find them again. By the end of his first week on the alien planet, Jake had established a comfortable routine. He woke up early to tend his small garden. He spent the morning fishing and collecting useful materials. Afternoons were for improving his camp and exploring the area safely. The razor hawks had become used to seeing Jake and no longer bothered him. The tunnel mice visited his camp every evening looking for scraps of food. His plants were growing well and providing fresh food to add to his camping supplies. Other contestants were having a much harder time. Jake could see smoke from distant fires where someone was in trouble. Strange sounds echoed across the landscape at night. The trial was supposed to eliminate all but the strongest warriors, but Jake was treating it like an interesting camping trip. The Zephyrians monitoring the trial were confused by what they saw. Their instruments showed that the human was healthier and more comfortable than any contestant in the history of their trials. Jake had turned a survival ordeal into what looked like a wilderness vacation. Elder Zitha called a meeting of the Zephyrian Council. "This human is not following the patterns we expect," he said. "He does not fight the challenges of this world. Instead, he seems to be making friends with them." The other council members watched Jake on their viewing screens. He was sitting by a comfortable fire eating fresh vegetables from his garden while tunnel mice played around his feet. In the background, razorhawks circled peacefully in the evening sky. "Perhaps," said one council member, "we have been thinking about survival in the wrong way." By his 3rd week on the alien planet, Jake had transformed his simple campsite into something that looked like a small village. His original shelter had grown into 3 connected buildings made from local materials. He had a main living area, a storage room for food and supplies, and a workshop where he made tools and repaired equipment. Jake had discovered that the planet's strange crystal formations could carry sound across long distances if you knew how to use them properly. He spent several days experimenting with different crystals until he figured out how to create a communication network. Now he could hear what was happening in other parts of the trial area. The sounds he heard were not encouraging. Most of the other contestants were struggling badly. Many had been injured by the dangerous wildlife or poisoned by the wrong plants. Others were starving because they could not find safe food sources. Some had given up entirely and were just waiting for the trial to end. Jake felt bad for these beings who were suffering while he was comfortable and well-fed. He had always believed that people should help each other when they could. Even though this was supposed to be a competition, Jake decided to see if any of the other contestants needed assistance. He used his crystal communication system to send out a message. His voice carried across the landscape through the network of crystals he had set up. "Hello out there," Jake said. "This is Jake Morrison. If anyone needs help with food or shelter or medical supplies, please come to the area near the Black Rock Spires. I have extra resources and I am happy to share." The first response came from Zilithie, one of the sea creatures Jake had seen earlier. She had been trying to survive near a poisonous swamp and was very sick from drinking bad water. Jake guided her to his camp using the crystal communication system. Zilithie looked terrible when she arrived. Her skin was gray instead of its normal blue color and she could barely walk. Jake helped her sit down by his fire and gave her clean water mixed with minerals from his acid rain collection. He also prepared a mild soup using vegetables from his garden. "Why are you helping me, human?" Zilithie asked in a weak voice. "We are supposed to be competing against each other. Only one warrior is meant to survive this trial." Jake stirred the soup and smiled. "Where I come from, we believe that helping others is more important than winning competitions. Besides, this place is dangerous enough without us fighting each other. It makes more sense to work together." While Zilithie rested and recovered, Jake continued to send out messages on his crystal network. The next visitor was Vexstar, the large lizard warrior who had been fighting the Razorhawks since the trial began. He arrived at Jake's camp covered in cuts and burns from his battles. Vexstar was suspicious when he saw Jake tending to Zilithie. "What trick is this, human? Are you trying to weaken us before you attack?" Jake was cleaning one of Vexstar's wounds with antiseptic from his first aid kit. "No tricks, I'm just trying to help. You look like you have been having a rough time with those hawks. I figured out how to avoid fighting them if you are interested." Jake explained how the Razorhawks were just protecting their babies and showed Vexstar the safe routes around their nesting area. He also demonstrated how to collect their dropped feathers without threatening the birds. Vexstar listened carefully and seemed amazed that someone had found a peaceful solution to what he saw as a deadly enemy. Over the next few days, more contestants found their way to Jake's camp. Carthan arrived after his insect warriors had been defeated by the planet's toxic plants. 2 beings from a species Jake had never seen before came looking for medical help after eating poisonous fruits. Instead of turning anyone away, Jake welcomed them all. He taught them how to identify safe plants and showed them his water purification methods. He shared his shelter building techniques and helped them set up their own comfortable camps nearby. Jake's small campsite grew into a community of survivors working together. Zilithie used her natural abilities to help improve the water collection system. Vexstar's strength was useful for moving heavy rocks and building stronger shelters. Carthan's knowledge of plants helped Jake expand his garden. The beings shared stories about their homeworlds and taught each other useful skills. Jake learned about different fighting techniques and alien technologies. In return, he taught them about camping, fishing, and living comfortably in the wilderness. Jake showed them how to make friends with the local wildlife instead of fighting everything they encountered. The tunnel mice became camp mascots and helped everyone find new sources of food and water. Even the Razorhawks seemed to accept the growing community and stopped attacking the area entirely. The Zephyrians monitoring the trial, could not believe what they were seeing. Their sacred test of individual survival had turned into a cooperative village where different species were working together peacefully. Elder Zeta called for another emergency meeting. "This is completely against the purpose of our trial," one council member complained. "These beings are supposed to prove their individual strength through struggle and hardship. Instead, they are having some kind of social gathering." Elder Zethak studied the images from the planet's surface. Jake was teaching a group of aliens how to weave baskets from local plants, while others worked together to expand the community garden. Everyone looked healthy and happy instead of desperate and fighting for survival. "Perhaps," Elder Zethak said, "slowly, we need to reconsider what strength really means." Jake's community continued to grow and thrive. They built better shelters that could withstand the planet's storms. They established reliable food sources and clean water supplies. They created safe paths through the dangerous areas and set up warning systems for hazardous wildlife. Most importantly, they had learned to work together despite coming from completely different worlds and cultures. Beings who had never even heard of each other's species were now close friends, who shared resources and protected each other from danger. Jake often sat by the community fire in the evenings, watching his new friends interact. Zilithy would tell stories about her underwater cities while Vexstar demonstrated traditional war dances from his homeworld. Carthan shared the complex songs his people used to communicate across great distances. "You know," Jake said one evening as they all sat around the fire, "this is exactly what camping is supposed to be about. Getting away from all the complicated stuff in life and just enjoying nature with good friends." The aliens looked at him with confusion. "What is camping?" Vexstar asked. Jake laughed and started explaining how humans like to spend time outdoors for fun. The concept of doing difficult things voluntarily just for enjoyment was completely foreign to most of the aliens. Their cultures focused on survival and competition and proving strength through hardship. "So humans choose to live like this?" Zilithy asked. "You make shelters in the wilderness and cook food over fires because you enjoy it?" "Exactly," Jake said. "We call it recreation. It helps us relax and connect with nature and each other. Some of my best memories are from camping trips with friends and family." The aliens discussed this strange human concept late into the night. The idea that survival skills could be used for pleasure instead of just necessity was revolutionary. To them, they began to understand that Jake had not been trying to win their trial at all. He had simply been doing what humans considered a fun outdoor activity. By the end of the third week, Jake's community had become a permanent settlement on the alien world. They had built comfortable homes, established sustainable food production, and created a peaceful society where different species lived together in harmony. The trial was supposed to end in one more week, but nobody wanted to leave. The 30 days of the trial ended, but nobody in Jake's community wanted to leave the planet. What had started as a desperate survival challenge had become the most peaceful and productive settlement any of them had ever experienced. Representatives from dozens of alien species were living together in harmony and learning from each other every day. The Zephyrian Council faced a problem they had never encountered before. In thousands of years of conducting trials, they had never seen multiple survivors. Usually only one warrior remained alive at the end, and that being was honored as a great champion. Now they had an entire village of healthy, happy contestants who were asking if they could stay permanently. Elder Zethek transported down to the planet's surface to see Jake's community for himself. He expected to find warriors who had somehow cheated their way through the trial. Instead, he discovered what looked like a thriving research station, where beings from across the galaxy were working together on projects he could barely understand. Jake met the elder at the edge of the settlement. The human looked relaxed and cheerful as always. His clothes were clean and he had clearly been eating well. Behind him, the community buzzed with activity as aliens worked together on various projects. "Welcome to our little village," Jake said, with a smile. "Would you like a tour? We have accomplished some pretty interesting things over the past month." Elder Zethak followed Jake through the settlement. Everything he saw challenged his understanding of survival and strength. These beings had not just survived the deadly planet, they had improved it. The area around their community was more fertile and stable than it had been when the trial started. Zilithie was leading a group that had developed new ways to purify the planet's acidic water. They had created a system that not only made the water safe to drink, but also concentrated the useful minerals for fertilizer and medicine. Her people's underwater expertise combined with the other species' knowledge had produced technology none of them could have developed alone. Vexstar had used his warrior training in unexpected ways. Instead of fighting the dangerous wildlife, he had studied their behavior and learned to predict when and where they would be aggressive. He was teaching other species how to move safely through areas that had been considered deadly before. Carthan's insect people had always been experts at working together, but they had learned new cooperation techniques from the other species. They were now coordinating with beings who thought and communicated in completely different ways. The results were more efficient than anything they had achieved with their own kind alone. How did you accomplish all this? Elder Zethek asked Jake as they walked through gardens that were more productive than anything on the Zephyrian homeworld. Jake picked a ripe fruit from one of the plants and offered it to the elder. We just applied basic principles of good camping. Learn about your environment, work with nature instead of against it, share resources, and take care of each other. It's not complicated once you get the hang of it. Elder Zethek tasted the fruit. It was delicious and filled him with energy in a way that Zephyrian food never had. But these beings come from species that have been enemies for centuries. How did you get them to cooperate? That was the easy part, Jake said. When people are working together to solve real problems, they don't have time to worry about old grudges. Everyone here has skills that help the group survive better. Once they realized that cooperation made life easier and more fun, they stopped caring about their old conflicts. That evening, Elder Zethek attended one of the community's daily gatherings. Different species shared information about their projects and asked for help with problems they were facing. The meeting was organized but relaxed. Everyone contributed ideas and offered assistance to others. Jake stood up during the meeting. We have a visitor today. Elder Zethek is from the people who created this trial. He wanted to see what we have built here. The gathered aliens turned to look at the elder with interest. Instead of anger or resentment, they showed curiosity about his crystalline biology and his people's history. Several beings asked thoughtful questions about Zephyrian culture and technology. Your trial has taught us much, Vexstar said to the elder. Not about individual strength as you intended, but about the power of working together. We have learned more in 30 days than our species had discovered in centuries of separate development. Elder Zethek felt confused and uncomfortable. The purpose of the trial was to find great warriors who could inspire their species to greater achievements. These beings had certainly achieved great things, but not through the methods his people had expected. After the meeting, Elder Zethek walked with Jake along the paths that connected different parts of the settlement. Soft lights made from bioluminescent plants lit the way. The sounds of peaceful activity came from workshops and homes where aliens were working on projects or sharing stories. Your people created this trial to test strength, Jake said as they walked. But maybe you have been thinking about strength in the wrong way. These folks are stronger together than any of them could have been alone. They have solved problems and built things that no single species could accomplish. Elder Zethek stopped walking and looked around at the thriving community. But strength has always meant the ability to survive alone, to overcome challenges through individual power and skill. Jake sat down on a bench that Carthan's people had built from woven plant fibers. That works okay for short-term survival. But for long-term success, you need community. You need to be the kind of person others want to help and work with. Real strength is making everyone around you stronger too. The elder sat beside Jake and considered these words. His people had always measured success by individual achievement and personal power. The idea that helping others could be a form of strength was completely foreign to Zephyrian culture. Look at what happened here, Jake continued. Your trial was designed to eliminate all but the strongest individual. Instead, it created the strongest community any of these species had ever seen. Everyone here is safer, healthier, and more capable than they would have been on their own. 3 days later, a human diplomatic ship arrived to collect Jake, Captain Lisa. Jane had been sent to retrieve the human contestant and report on how badly he had failed the alien trial. Instead, she found Jake leading what appeared to be an advanced research colony that was making breakthrough discoveries every day. "Jake Morrison, what exactly have you been doing here?" Lisa asked as she toured the settlement. "Earth sent me to pick up your remains and apologize to the aliens for wasting their time." Jake grinned and introduced Lisa to his alien friends. "I have been camping with some really interesting people. We have learned a lot from each other and built a pretty nice community. Want to stay for dinner? Zillathy makes this amazing soup using local ingredients." Lisa spent several hours talking with the various aliens about their projects and discoveries. Every conversation revealed new technologies or techniques that could benefit multiple civilizations. The knowledge being generated here was worth more than most planets. "The Zephyrians expected me to die in a few days," Jake explained to Lisa, "over dinner. But I just treated this like any other camping trip. Set up a good camp, learn about the local environment, make friends with the neighbors, and share resources. Before you know it, everyone is having a good time and working together." Elder Zethek had remained on the planet to study Jake's methods. He spent his time observing how the different species interacted and learning about their collaborative techniques. Everything he saw challenged fundamental beliefs that his people had held for thousands of years. "Captain Chun," the elder said, "your species has shown us something remarkable. We believe that strength came from individual power and the ability to dominate challenges. Your Jake Morrison has demonstrated that true strength comes from building community and working in harmony with your environment." Lisa looked around at the peaceful settlement where former enemies were working together and sharing resources freely. "Jake has always been good at making friends wherever he goes, I guess. Even alien death planets are not an exception." 6 months after the trial ended, Jake Morrison had become the most famous human in the galaxy. News of how he had turned the Zephyrian survival trial into a peaceful community had spread to hundreds of worlds. Alien species that had never worked together before were asking Jake to teach them his methods. The former trial planet was now called Morrison's Garden by most of the galaxy. The settlement that Jake had started with a few desperate contestants had grown into a permanent research station where beings from dozens of species lived and worked together. They had solved problems that had puzzled individual civilizations for centuries. Jake traveled between different worlds. Now, as a survival consultant and community building specialist, he packed his camping gear and visited planets where species were having conflicts or struggling with environmental challenges. His simple approach of treating problems like camping puzzles usually produced amazing results on a world where two species had been fighting over water rights for generations. Jake helped them see that cooperation would give both groups more water than either could get alone. He showed them how to build systems that collected and purified water more efficiently than their separate efforts had achieved. Another planet was struggling with aggressive wildlife that attacked settlements and destroyed crops. Jake spent time studying the animals and learned that they were just hungry and looking for food sources. He helped the colonists create feeding areas away from their towns and plant crops that the wildlife preferred to eat. The Zephyrian Council had completely changed their approach to the trial system. Instead of individual survival tests, they now organized cooperative challenges where mixed species teams worked together to solve environmental problems on various worlds throughout the galaxy. Elder Zethek had become Jake's biggest supporter among the Zephyrians. He traveled with Jake to different worlds and studied how human camping techniques could be adapted to help alien species work together better. The elder was writing a book about cooperation and community building that would be shared across the galaxy. Jake Morrison has taught us that strength is not about conquering challenges alone, Elder Zethek often said in his speeches to other civilizations. True strength comes from building communities where everyone contributes their unique abilities to help the group thrive. Back on Morrison's Garden, the original trial contestants had become teachers and guides for new visitors. Vexstar ran the first interspecies wilderness school where young beings from across the galaxy learned about environmental cooperation and peaceful problem-solving. Zilithie had developed water purification techniques that were now being used on dozens of worlds. Her methods combined knowledge from aquatic species with mineral processing techniques from desert dwellers and crystal technology from the Zephians. No single species could have created such effective systems alone. Carthan led expeditions to other challenging worlds where his team helped establish similar cooperative communities. They had learned that Jake's camping approach worked on almost any planet. If you took time to understand the local environment and work with it instead of fighting it, the ecosystem of Morrison's Garden continued to flourish under the care of its diverse residents. Plants and animals that had been struggling to survive in the harsh environment were now thriving. The collaborative approach to environmental management had healed damage that had been building up for thousands of years. Jake returned to Morrison's Garden regularly between his consulting trips. He enjoyed seeing how his alien friends had continued to develop their community and solve new challenges together. The place felt like home to him even though it was light years away from Earth. During one of his visits, Jake found Elder Zithek teaching a group of young aliens how to build shelters using local materials. The Elder had become quite good at practical camping skills and seemed to enjoy working with his hands instead of just thinking about abstract concepts. How does it feel to have changed the entire galaxy's approach to cooperation? The Elder asked Jake as they sat by a fire that evening. Jake poked at the burning logs with a stick and smiled. I didn't really change anything. I just showed people that camping skills work pretty much everywhere. The hard part is getting folks to try something different instead of sticking with old habits that don't work very well. A group of young beings from various species gathered around the fire to hear Jake tell stories about his adventures on different worlds. They loved hearing about the creative solutions he had found to problems that had seemed impossible to solve. The secret, Jake told his young audience, is to remember that every challenge is just a puzzle waiting to be solved. Instead of fighting against problems, you need to understand them and find ways to work with the situation instead of against it. One young Zephyrian asked, "But what if the problem seems too big and dangerous to approach peacefully?" Jake thought for a moment while he added another log to the fire. I have never found a problem that got easier by fighting it. Even the scariest situations usually have simple solutions if you take time to understand what is really happening. Most of the time, things that seem dangerous are just trying to protect themselves or find what they need to survive. Jake's camping and survival company had grown beyond anything he had imagined when he first started teaching wilderness skills back on Earth. Morrison's outdoor adventures now operated on dozens of worlds and helped beings from hundreds of species learn basic outdoor skills and cooperation techniques. His alien instructors taught specialized courses on different types of environments. Desert specialists helped beings learn to thrive in hot, dry climates. Aquatic experts showed land dwellers how to work safely around water. Cold weather specialists taught survival techniques for frozen worlds, but the most popular courses were always the community building workshops where different species learned to work together on practical projects. These classes produced the most dramatic results as former enemies discovered they could accomplish amazing things when they combined their different abilities and knowledge. Jake often reflected on how much his life had changed since that day, when the aliens had abducted him from his hiking trail in Colorado. He had started out thinking he was going on a dangerous survival challenge. Instead, he had discovered that the galaxy was full of interesting people who just needed to learn how to get along with each other. The final scene that Jake would always remember took place during a celebration on Morrison's Garden. Representatives from over 50 species had gathered to honor the first anniversary of the community. Beings who had once considered each other mortal enemies were now sharing food and stories around a giant bonfire. Jake sat on a log next to Elder Zithek and watched species that had never even communicated before working together to prepare the feast. Children from different worlds played games together while their parents shared knowledge about art and science and philosophy. "You know," Jake said to the elder as they watched the peaceful celebration, "this is exactly what I hoped would happen when I first started teaching people about camping. The whole point is to get away from all the complicated stuff in civilization and remember that we are all just people trying to enjoy life together." Elder Ziduk nodded thoughtfully. "Your species has given the galaxy a great gift, Jake Morrison. You have shown us that the universe is not a place where we must fight to survive alone. It is a place where we can work together to build something better than any of us could create by ourselves." Jake looked up at the alien stars shining overhead. Somewhere out there were more worlds where people were struggling with problems that could probably be solved with basic camping skills and cooperation. His work was far from finished, but he was looking forward to every new challenge. "The universe is a pretty big camping ground," Jake said as he added another log to the fire. "The secret to thriving out here is not about proving you are the toughest camper. It is about being the kind of neighbor that others want to have around when things get difficult." The celebration continued late into the night with beings from across the galaxy sharing their cultures and learning from each other around Jake's simple campfire. It was exactly the kind of evening that made all his adventures worthwhile.